questions on page 173, 174? What can I help you with? No questions? Or did someone say something I couldn't hear you? We're good? Okay. I'm going to start out with, let's get this to open. We've been doing linear regression models, and not everything falls as a linear regression model. Okay? So let's just base it off of what we have here. Does that look like could it be a straight line? I guess if we had a whole bunch of data, maybe we could make it work. But what does it kind of look like a little bit? Looks like it has a curve. So this could be one of two things. It could be an exponential regression, or it could be a quadratic regression. So I'm going to go under Stat, Calculate, and then notice, we use number 8 for the linear regression, but notice they have quadratic regression, which means parabola, cubic regression, which means a third-degree polynomial, quartic is fourth degree, linear regression, natural log regression, which natural log and exponential probably fall under the same category. Oh, nope, there's an exponential regression. And then power regression. And then it talks about logistics, sign regression. And then they have lots and lots and lots of different ones. So I think that the one that's up there could be a natural log. And if we go under calculate, they give us this. So we still have an r squared value and an r value, okay, both being 1, which is great. Now, when you start dealing with regressions that aren't linear regressions, I think you'll only have a r value between 0 and 1. You won't have from -1 to +1. I think -1 to +1 only works for linear models. Okay, and again, the r value when it becomes negative just means you have a negative slope. Though you have something called deal with slopes in this, you don't necessarily have that. As you progress, if you go on and start taking calculus courses, you start talking about rates of change. Rates of change is a slope. And where those kind of play in as far as these go. So let's go here. Come on. There we go. So let's say we had similar to the one that we had posted. This could be what our thing is, but this also could have fallen under this category as well. So the green's a quadratic, aka parabola. The blue is exponential. And I'm pretty positive that the r values for these will go between 0 and 1. But there was a term I had said in calculus, they might take a singleton point and they want to find a rate of change at that point. Okay? And a lot of times it's called the instantaneous rate of change, which means I could draw a singleton straight line that goes through it, touches it once. Okay? As the slope increases or decreases or becomes 0, there's different things that take place in calculus. But a lot of times when you do one of the regressions, like let's go back to this, let's turn our thing into stat, calculate. Let's do a quadratic regression. I think the quadratic regression will only have an r squared value, and it doesn't have an r value. Okay, and I think the reason that takes place is because the parabola or something to a fourth degree or sixth degree or an even exponent would, because they both have the same end limits, is why it happens. Yeah.
So so the correlation is still the best way to determine the relationship. Instead of the shape of the curve, there's one like the cubic model or the quadratic or whatever. So because sorry.
So here's the really hard thing. If you're going to use those types of regressions, you want a lot of data. Okay? And here's the hard thing. So if we had just a regular XY axis, if I have 3 points, so you'd probably be safe to say, hey, I could probably make a parabola happen. Okay, but I could also do this. That kind of thing. So, but there's only 3 pieces of data. So there's all kinds of things that you can get that r squared value to give you 1, which is like, oh, wait, we have a really good thing. It's like, yeah, as far as our limited amount of data points, we can say that, and we can come up with different graphs real easily. Go ahead.
I was going to say the shape is not necessarily an indicator of thought.
Correct. Okay. It's when you look at that r squared value, and you want more points or more data. Okay, when you do something like this. Okay, but when I used to teach International Baccalaureate, the kids had to do a project where they were collecting data, and I had kids that would collect, a handful of data points, and then they'd say, "Oh, this is the model that fits with our data," make something like that, and they showed that it had an r squared value that was really good, but because there's only 4 pieces of data, you can make all kinds of things work. If you had 1 piece of data, you could come up with linear regressions on it. You could come up with any regression, and it's going to have an r squared value equal to 1, which means it's really good. So you just have to be aware there are other times that you have other models take place. If you had something that looked like this, you have a lot of data. That definitely doesn't look linear. This definitely looks like it would form some sort of parabola. And then a lot of times it's parabola, it's just going to give you this, okay, or close to 1. And if you ever wanted to truly just find what the r value was, all you'd have to do is you'd have to just say, well, that's the same thing as taking the square root of both of those. So let's say you had an r squared value that came out to 0.79. So whatever the square root of 0.79 is. Yeah. So if you ever get stuck saying, hey, what is the residual, the r value, and they give you the r squared only and they don't have an r value, just take the square root of it, and the calculator will handle it pretty nicely.
So then what happens if so I'm looking at the homework, just the first question on the homework, and it gives us 3 different models with correlations. And the linear one is negative, but the rest not. So
okay.
Compare those.
Okay, so the linear negative correlation means that basically the slope is negative. That's all it would mean.
Yes, so it doesn't matter that it's negative. Okay,
so
it is so close to 0, so it's not a good correlation anyways, but
right.
So it doesn't matter if you're comparing a negative linear with a positive quadratic and cubic. Right.
So if let's say we had a linear r value that came out to negative 0.9797, something like that, and then we had a quadratic that it told you the r value was 0.9700. Which one is the better correlation? This one, because it's closer to -1.
Okay. So
Okay.
you still treat it the same way, just
Yeah, so linear goes from -1 to +1. Quadratic would go from 0 to 1.
I'm saying
Cubic and all the others. Uh-huh.
cubic.
Uh-huh. All right, so let's take a look at notes to 12. And I think we're still on track. Let's see, Scotty. Yeah, we do have a test coming Friday. Okay, so again, you can use a note card on it. You can use multiple note cards. So, sometime between now and Friday, if you don't have a note card, come see me. I'll get you a note card. If you have note cards, bring them on in. But let's take a look at 212. Okay, this goes exactly what we're talking about. Alternative or alternate regression models. You can have a regression model that follows something else. Okay, so basically, if you look at the model that's listed as the very first one on page 60, it says consider the scatter plot from 211, and a lot of you recognized that you have all of this vertical data, and then you have these couple pieces of data that are way out far to the right, a couple that are closer to the left, but most of your data falls into this type of characteristic. And they say, hey, we're drawing this line of best fit. Obviously, these pieces of data out here are bringing that line down. If you didn't include these, you'd probably get a line of best fit that would be closer to this. What would you trust, the red or the purple? I'd say the red, because the majority of your data falls into that, where those outliers, one, let's investigate it, but trust this, don't trust this. Okay? So it says, as we know, it says almost all of the data fell below 20,000 in foot traffic, with two very high outliers, one about 42,000 and another about 54,000. It's very possible that the regression model that works, for the most part, is simple data breaks down, doesn't work at all when the foot traffic exceeds a certain number, say 20,000 in foot traffic. Why are there a couple days that are expected? So they're saying that this is the amount of foot traffic versus the amount of revenue. Okay, so y'all ever watch that on July 4th, the hot dog eating contest out there in Jersey? You got those guys that eat like 70 hot dogs in 10 minutes, and it's crazy what they eat. So that I've been on that boardwalk, and that boardwalk on a summer day, on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, is very light foot traffic, but it is a lot more foot traffic on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's ridiculous foot traffic on major holidays like July 4th or Memorial Day or Labor Day. Okay, so do you have, I know I think someone said they went to Vegas in here over break. Maybe it was another class, can't remember. Y'all been to Vegas before? I lived in Vegas for quite a few years. Vegas was, if I wanted to go see something on the Strip, I would go during the week because it was empty. Like you could walk down the road with your arms spread as far as you can doing this, and you wouldn't touch a person. Vegas's population, when I lived there, would double on the weekends. Okay, there was about 1.2 million people living in Vegas at the time. On any given weekend, the population of Vegas would be above 2 million, which was absolutely crazy. People would come in on the weekends. When I lived in Vegas, you had Las Vegas Boulevard. And so down here is the sign, "Welcome to Las Vegas," which I think everyone has seen the sign. They've made like a parking area and a little grassy area, so because people were crossing the road to or getting in the middle of the road to get pictures taken, and they realized, oh, okay, this is a landmark that people want pictures of. Rather than people playing Frogger with traffic, let's create a parking lot so people could park and then take pictures. And then as you go down, basically you have the airport here, you have the Tropicana here, you have the MGM here. This is Tropicana here, Tropicana Boulevard. You have the Luxor, Mandalay Bay, Excalibur, New York, New York. This was the Monte Carlo. Now it's called the MGM Grand. And then as you progress down the strip, go north down the strip, you have tons of others. What's that?
Isn't there like a whole like old Vegas and Vegas side?
Yeah, so old Las Vegas is Boulder Highway, leads to it, and then it becomes something called Fremont Street. And this is the old strip. That's the original mafia-owned casinos. A couple other mafia-owned casinos happen down here. Halfway down the strip, halfway to Fremont Street from the airport is you have the Stratosphere. The scary thing about the Stratosphere is the Stratosphere has three pillars that hold up this whole top section, and then you have the roller coasters and stuff at the top. There are engineers, structural engineers that live in Las Vegas that refuse to go into the Stratosphere because one of these pillars is 3 feet short. It's 3 feet shorter than the others. So basically, they put a bunch of shims 1,000 feet up to make sure that that roller coaster stuff is level. Oh, I've been at the top too. Yeah, and I've done the roller coasters. I've done it all. And it's just funny when you hear the structural engineers. The funny thing about the Mandalay Bay is the Mandalay Bay opened. It was, what was it? It was called the Rio Rancho, which was a 3-story building and casino. And I watched them blow that up in 1996 on New Year's. Vegas is the only place in the world where let's have a celebration because we're going to blow something up. And you go out there and they have this, here's the safe line, quote unquote safe, meaning that the explosion might not kill you. And you watch these casinos just implode on themselves. And then there's dust everywhere, and you're like, this must be healthy. And then they built the Mandalay Bay. When they built the Mandalay Bay, if you're looking from the sky down on it, it is a building that kind of does this. It's 3 wings to it. The very center of the Mandalay Bay, after they built it, because somebody paid off somebody, said, oh yeah, the ground's fine. The very center of the building, the heaviest mass of the building is in the very center here. And it actually sank 24 inches once they opened it. And people are walking in going, wow, that's a big step down. I mean, it was like literally that significant. And they're sitting there looking at it going, I don't know. That shouldn't have happened. Well, it built it on sand. And if you ever built anything like a sandcastle, you know that if moisture gets to it, what happens? Well, sand wafts away nicely. So in order for them to pass their inspection, because they closed it down for 2 weeks right after they opened it, they decided, oh, well, let's just create ramps down that 2 foot. Because somebody came in and said, that's as much as it'll sink. Okay. And there was cracks in the building and everything like that. Now they kind of covered a lot of stuff up, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot of people who were paid a lot of money to say, go ahead and pass it on inspection. You want your kid to go to Harvard? Here you go. The full ride. And it's just as corrupt as they come. But I don't even know how I got on this train. I think the mega hotels are incredible. The MGM from front corner to back pool is over a mile. So if you were to do that, I think that's pretty amazing. I did, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they spend a lot of money. And here's the goofy thing about Vegas. If you ever go to Vegas, you'll see a brand new casino and there's still construction going on. And the reason they do that is they've realized, okay, if we have a portion of this under construction, it will lower our taxes. And the taxes they would have to pay to the federal government are more than having the construction done. And then the really sad thing is you have Circus Circus, that's way down here. Okay? Circus Circus is like the hood, but is the richest casino in the entire state. Because Circus Circus owns all of this land that all of these guys are on. Okay? And it also owns quite a bit of land here. The only land that they don't own is Caesar's Palace. And the reason why what they did is Circus Circus leases the land to these guys. And the reason they lease the land to these guys is it's cheaper for these guys to be on leased land in taxes than owned land. And so they kind of keep Circus Circus kind of as a hood or a kind of a cruddier place for a reason. Circus Circus has all the money in the world. They could make the biggest, most extravagant place because of the amount of money that the people that own Circus Circus have because of all the land that's leased. So my point on all of that is you have certain days that you have higher foot traffic, but you might not have as much sales. Are there a lot of fancy dancy stores in Vegas? Yeah. Okay. And it's so funny because every one of the casinos, the big casinos and the malls had the Louis Vuitton store, and it's always packed. Well, I'm pretty sure you can buy that type of handbag and bags and luggage by Louis Vuitton anywhere, but people seem to love it in Vegas, and they're always packed. But the foot traffic, the people walking back and forth, the people that are doing the entertainment on the sidewalks, you know, those guys, the more people are walking up and down the sidewalks, the more people that are taking pictures with characters and watching certain acts. People are just throwing money into their little boxes and they're making all kinds of money. Those guys make a little tiny bit of money when you have very little foot traffic. The stores themselves, more foot traffic means less overall sales as far per capita. So if you had 1 million people walking by a store, you might get 10,000 of them that walk into that store at some point. Okay? But if you have 100,000 people walk by the store, you still might get 10,000 people in your store. So you're getting a higher percent of people that are coming into the store depending upon the foot traffic. So in Vegas, it's an anomaly. And it is, I don't recommend ever living there. When I first lived there, they didn't have the overpasses for pedestrians. So if you were on the west side of the strip, when the weekend started, you stayed on the west side, or you drove all the way south to Blue Diamond and then crossed over to get to the east side. But there was people I knew who lived on the east side, and there were people I knew on the west side. People on the west side associated with people on the west side on the weekends. People on the east side associated with people on the east side. There was no crossover because you would spend half your life waiting in traffic because everyone in the world is crossing in front of traffic. Now they have these pedestrian bridges, so it's a little nicer, but that's how it goes. Okay, so on page 61, notice they start bringing a quadratic in there, or a third degree polynomial as the lower one. So Notice there is the quadratic regression, which is found in the same place on your calculator. And just stat calculate. You can find quadratic regression. You can also find other things. So this one is a cubic because a third degree polynomial is called a cubic because it's 3D. Okay, so scatter plots can fit those types of things. And again, you want to focus on the r squared value for the most part because the r value isn't always presented when you're looking at the data on a calculator. And again, if you want to find what an r value is, you take the square root of r squared and you get the r value. And I'm on page 62. It says the math behind nonlinear regression is very complex. We do have calculators that can perform those calculations for us. We're not going to go in too far of depth for those, but I just want you to aware that not everything has to form a linear regression. It can follow any mathematical equation that your mind could think of, including the keys on the calculator going, what's this log key? I mean, if you took Algebra 2, which I believe most of you have, you've probably seen logarithm, and you've probably seen natural log, and you've probably expanded them, condensed them, did a brief graph of them, possibly. So things like that. A high correlation implies a strong relationship between the variables. It also implies that the model will make more accurate predictions. But a high correlation does not imply that we have found the best fit for the data. We truly seek the residual plot that has the random scatter. So remember, the residual plot, the residual value is either a positive or a negative number. So when you look at the residual, you have the x-axis, and you have data that's above it and data that's below it. Okay? Neither of these pieces of data are bad. It's just how far are we either above or below our line of best fit. Okay? A randomly scattered residual plot shows that errors made by the regression model are simply random errors, and we can't fix random. Okay? So, what our plan for the next couple days is I'm going to give you this assignment, and we'll go over this on, we'll go over 212. So I want you to do page 175, 176. I think that's all it is. 175, 173 pages. 175. And we'll check this off tomorrow. And then after that, we're going to continue. Once we do that, we're going to head to the next one. And then, so Wednesday will be 213, 214 will be Thursday. And then we are done with chapter 2. And we're going to start getting into chapter 3. And I think that chapter 3, a lot of you are going to start gravitating to, oh, there are things that I've heard in my past that these make sense. Okay, talking about, there's all kinds of fun things that you have seen, maybe not fun, but things that you've seen, like if you've ever gotten your test scores back for the ACT or SAT, there's all kinds of information that it gives you. And chapter 3 is going to talk to us about what types of things, and they deal with standard deviation. They deal with z-scores, which is the dimensions in between the first and second standard deviation, or the first and 0 and the first, or whatever. And we're going to talk about the normal curve. And chapter 3, we should be able to get done with chapter 3 probably the week before Thanksgiving. And then we're really going to have fun with the probability of chapter 4. And then we're done with the semester, and we have a final exam and all those other fun things that come with that. So if you would, you have the opportunity, if you'd like, you can go ahead and start on this page. And or if you choose to do other things, that's your prerogative. But I will be checking that off tomorrow for points. So, but please do me a favor. If you go on to Power School, and if you ever see a goose egg, meaning a 0 or something, get it done and get it to me before the end of the semester. That way I can give you the points. I'll give you full points for it. I'm not the teacher to say, oh, this was more than 2 weeks late, so I'm only giving you half the points. I'll give you the full points for any homeworks that you're missing. And if you have a test or quiz that you owe me or need to finish, come do that. You still get the full points that you earn. You don't. I'm not. I've actually never been that teacher. It always drove me nuts when it's like, this kid can only earn 50% of the points that they earned on a test or quiz. I'm like, well, that's a good motivating factor for a kid to come in and do it. Stuff happens, and I hope you realize that I know that stuff happens. That is, you can't always control. So that's